When it comes to frontal cuts, we've always left it up to the user to either draw their cut and just click to perform a laser cut, in which it'll attempt to cut through the mesh, or you can click and drag and just leave it like so. And then when you rotate the view, you're able to basically perform the depth part of your extrusion. If you're working in a non-frontal view, you're able to just draw and then move the mouse in order to perform your extrusion, which is pretty much the preferred way to work when it comes to working inside of Boxcutter. However, sometimes you want to work from just a frontal axis and just be very quick and just cut through the mesh. In fact, it's important to remember that if you're hovering over the mesh, you're going to draw on surface, while if you draw off of the mesh, it's going to do something called view align. And you can see that in the top where the bar goes and says view. Now whenever I click, I'm performing a view align cut, which allows me to cut all the way through the mesh. And on surface, I can just draw it, and then if I just click, it will perform the laser cut operation as well. However, when it comes to defining any sort of depth that's either all the way through or nothing, there's no way to really do that in the current version of Boxcutter 717 unless you rotate your view and move the mouse in order to perform your extrusion. This is something that we sought to change over the course of this next update. So here I am inside of Boxcutter 717.18, and if we draw a box, we can now move the mouse in order to perform an extrusion and control how much depth it's actually getting. The only way you can really visually tell how much depth is happening is through the assistive hops cutter notification here. That's part of HardOps, but is built to assist Boxcutter as well. And we see that as I'm moving the mouse, I'm able to cut all the way through. And you see that even though I'm continuing to move the mouse, I'm not able to cut any further. And that is because there is an extrusion lock in place now, thanks to the power of AccuCut, where basically we won't allow you to just shoot this out in space from a frontal axis, because you really don't have any idea how far you're shooting it out aside from numeric values. So in order to see it in action, we could press tab, and that will pause the shape, and then when we middle mouse button move, we can actually see exactly how far this is cut. So anytime you perform a view-based extrusion, it's always going to attempt to constrain itself to the bounds of the form in order to ensure that you get something that's a little bit controllable. Sometimes whenever you have your cutters be far too long, it results in strange dots when it comes to hops tools. So I will just stretch this out, and we'll just set the origin to this location and then just get rid of it. So if I were to Alt W, switch over to hops tool, and we try to look for the dot for this cutter, we see that the cutter is somewhere very strange out in space. So if I had to recall this cutter, it would be a very nuanced and annoying process, because the cutter isn't actually located anywhere recognizable. So if I were to just Control Z to bring all that back, and we attempt that again, we now see that our cutter dot is located somewhere near the actual vicinity of the object that we're cutting into. So there's a lot of reasons behind it, is to try to get these systems to connect up very nicely without a whole lot of issue. But just letting you know that we've taken some steps towards being able to draw in front and then drag the cursor in order to control how much depth you're actually giving. So you still can just draw and then click in order to perform a laser cut. But if you want to give it depth, you would just draw and then move the cursor, and then you can actually see it giving it depth in action. In fact, in addition to all of this, there's a control accelerator, where in your preferences of the behavior panel under input, there's now something called control factor. So I'll right click this and set it back to its default value, which apparently I just can't do in this area, but the default value is actually 5. And this means that whenever I hold control, it will actually accelerate the value by 5 that the mouse is giving it. So I'll just draw a circle, and I'll just hold control, and when I move it, just notice how I'm not even very far off the shape before I'm already cutting through, and then I just click and that operation has been completed. So just letting you know that in the event that you're trying to cut something that's even larger than your current form, using view extrusion, which I'm hoping will catch on with users, all you have to do is just increase your control factor, and then you'll be able to draw even further than normal, because we still don't have 3D capabilities yet added to Boxcutter's measurement system for mouse vectors or something like that. Don't get me started. So here we are setting it to 50, and I will just click and drag, and you see me attempting to cut through using the system that we have already, and it's just not going to make the cut all the way through both of these boxes. But if I hold control, I'm now able to cut all the way through. So letting you know that even when it comes in terms of cutting in very large spaces, just using view, you're able to do that. I mean, it's really kind of a waste just using it to jump all the way to what would normally be given to us by laser cut. But we see here that laser cut just didn't do the job because of the multi-mesh situation. In fact, that time it did. But all right, maybe it's fine now. Sometimes there's a fluke that'll have me going back to the labs reporting issues, but now you know that there's now an extrude from depth parameter added to Boxcutter, and that's how you would use it.